So, Sean Avery, he came out with a book, and I understand the book's getting a lot of traction, and people probably want to discuss the book. I don't need to discuss the book. This magazine says right on the cover, the most hated man in the NHL. Hint, it's Sean Avery. And the way this starts really tells you a good mental image you don't need from a book. Marlene Avery motions for her son to take a back seat on the ferry headed back to Nova Scotia from Prince Edward Island. Sit there, Sean, and don't you dare move out of that seat, says Marlene, with a harsh tone that suggests any movement by the boy could result in his swimming the rest of the way home. If the weather's chilly, it's not nearly as cold as the looks that Marlene, and more specifically Sean, are receiving. Other parents, whose sons have just played against the young Sean Avery, are on the same ferry, and his presence doesn't exactly inspire warm, fuzzy feelings. It used to be quite interesting, Marlene recalls. Quite often we were on the same ferry as the teams we just played against. I saw my share of dirty looks from other parents, but I just gave it back to them. I didn't care. Things haven't changed too much over the years, and by now Marlene is used to dealing with the fallout from her son's aggressive play and fondness for speaking his mind. Sean is that aggravating little bugger your kid plays against, the one that tries to punish you whether his team is up by 3 goals or trailing by 3. Not only that, he's a great little player too, and he's as quick on his mouth with his mouth as he is on his skates. In his short NHL career, Sean Avery's become better known for things he's said rather than the things he's done. When Phoenix defenseman Dennis Cogier rammed the Kings' Jeremy Roenick during a 2005-2006 preseason game, Avery responded, "That's typical of most French guys in the league with a visor on, running around and playing tough and not backing anything up." When he was fined $1,000 by the league for diving, Avery fumed, "How can a guy," he's mentioning Colin Campbell here, "sitting in an office in New York determine if you dived or not by watching a tape? They don't know if you had a bad ankle or torn bursa sac or something." Further on the fine, he said, "It's in the collective bargaining agreement. That's something our great competition committee did." Edmonton's George Larocque, who's black, accused Avery of calling him a monkey. Avery insists it didn't happen. That one I'm torn on. Avery, if he did something douchebaggy, he'd admit he did it. He'd do it. He'd admit it with pride. Avery's most notable outburst, and unquestionably the funniest, was an exchange with Anaheim broadcaster and former NHL goalie Howard. He said something during a game. Something like, "You'd like to see Travis Moen grab me and kick my ass. Can you say that? Listen, I know a lot of things I do. I'm going to get some stuff in return." But I didn't need him, of all people, saying that. The tone was he was calling me a cheap shot artist and a dirty player. I rarely take cheap shot at guys. I think I play straight up and in their face. So I went after him and told him what I thought. The next day, Avery and Hayward were in the same dressing room and went toe-to-toe or mouth-to-mouth. "You're an embarrassment," Avery said. "You're the reason the league doesn't have a national television deal. You're a bleeping announcer, and you are a bleeping player." I'll just say crappy. "How would you know?" Hayward responded. "When I played, you were in your 3rd year of 8th grade. You want to see an embarrassment? Look in the mirror, Sean." Touché. That was a pretty good comeback, Avery admits. "We actually went at it a couple of times, and he had some time to think that one up. I actually thought that was pretty funny." See, and then they get into the meat of this, too. What isn't funny, though, is how Avery's season ended. With 3 games remaining, he got into an argument with assistant coach Mark Hardy during practice and was booted off the ice. The two had a running feud going all season. You know that kid only a mother could love? Well, he pushes even that boundary sometimes. "When you raise Sean, you're used to dealing with the fallout," Marlene says. "I've been in training for 26 years. Last year was just more of the same. So I work as a workplace equity officer. I go into companies and talk about diversity and treating everybody equally." And then he comes out with some of these crazy statements. It's like, "Okay, Sean, can you please tone that down? We've had many chats like that." And that's how he played the game. So now Avery's come out with a book that basically says, "Hey, I had the most fun of anybody. I had so much fun. I had so much fun playing hockey." And yet he puts his own union down when he's a player. He puts down the league office regularly. He puts down other players on the ice. And he says, "I didn't play dirty." And yet there's the Sean Avery rule. The one where you can't stand in front of a goalie facing him during the play and wave your arms around. He did that against Brodeur, and of course Brodeur famously wouldn't shake his hand after, and he said after the game, "Yeah, Fatso wouldn't shake my hand." Avery had no respect for anybody. So now for him to come out and say anything that is worthwhile for me to pay money on a book to him, it's not going to happen. Avery's career, he said his hat trick would be getting a goal and a fight and taking home a beautiful model the same night. That kind of crap, like, you know, it comes right down to, and his comment about sloppy seconds and oh, everybody likes my leftovers, and he was referring to, famously, it's Dion Phaneuf and Elijah Cuthbert that he was referring to, but not as famously, which is weird, he was referring to Jarrett Stoll, who was with Rachel Hunter at the time, and Rachel Hunter had been involved with Sean Avery. And then Avery tried going into acting after, and then he got involved with a firm that went under and ended up owing him a bunch of money. Avery's been a lightning rod for a lot of fans. And I know there's fans of him. I know there are. I'm not sure I understand why. You can be a colorful player. You can be a colorful character. But, you know, at the end of your career, you got to look back and say, well, you know, I've done this and this and this. And it just feels like Avery used the NHL to try to become something else. Like he wanted to be an actor, but that really hasn't panned out for him. And for me, you know, when you look at Avery's career, really the lightning rod personally for me is when he was in Dallas and he made these statements. And now he says, well, I was just trying to get out of Dallas, so I said whatever I had to get out of Dallas. No. Sean Avery says things that Sean Avery says because he feels like it, which is why, in terms of reading a book from him, I would have a hard time reading it in that he's already said he'll say anything he has to get a rise out of people. So what's to stop him from just lying through his book? Nothing. And if he lied in the book, he'd just smile and say, well, I got your money. Like if you call him out, well, this chapter you say this happened, and I know that didn't happen. Well, I got your money. I don't care. So I'm glad there isn't currently a guy who's playing the game like Avery did. And it had to have driven his teammates insane. Like they said, he plays the same way up 3 goals as down 3 goals. You're winning a game. It's in the playoffs. You're winning a game. And he does this. It's got to drive you nuts. Now, famously in the series against Jersey, the Rangers ended up winning that series 4-1. And there was some credit given in the magazine article I was just reading to you. There's credit given to Sean Avery saying, oh, it knocked the Devils off their game. Removing credit from the Rangers who actually won the series. Avery was not an offensive catalyst in that series. And it would not be very long after that before he was done. He goes to Dallas. He signs a big contract. And he doesn't play worth 20% of what that contract was worth. Ends up back with the Rangers. Doesn't stick with the Rangers either, even though that's where he wanted to go. But I am sure that in his book, when you read it, that won't be his fault either. Nothing was ever Sean Avery's fault, really. And even in the book, he's like, well, I do regret some of the things I said. Not for saying them, but when I said them. Well, that's just ridiculous. But that's Sean Avery. Sean Avery's career was ridiculous. And from day one, as a kid, as I, you know, in that article I just read part of to you, it was there from the beginning. So if anybody expects me to add the Sean Avery book to my collection, I intend to buy the Ken Dryden book. I intend to buy the Clint Malarchuk book. I intend to buy all these books when they go on clearance, and they always do. And definitely Theron Fleury's Playing with Fire is one I got to read too. But I have no interest in a Sean Avery book because it's going to be, I am so awesome. I was so great. I was so controversial, and everything that happened was exactly the way I planned it. He's the guy that you could see him building something fantastic. You know, let's say he's building some fantastic structure, some building, and it all falls over, and he'd go, yeah, I knew that was going to happen. That was in the plans. I planned on building it, having it fall over, and then start over. I'm more of that's how I think outside the box. And then he'd make an excuse, change the subject, and he wouldn't take any blame for anything that happened, which is kind of how he ran his whole career. I don't know if I'm coming across as not having a lot of respect for Sean Avery, but if I'm coming across as having any, then I'm not being strong enough in my words. Did I ever laugh at anything he said? No, not once. And that's the other point too. He always struck me as the guy, you know, when you're at the party and he comes over and he tells you a joke and you pretend he didn't hear it, or You go, yeah, all right. And then he tells it again. And you go, yeah, I heard it. I heard it the first time. And then it's, if you go, look, dude, it's just not funny, he would accuse you of either not getting the joke or just being lame, and then move on to somebody else to talk to. That's what he always reminded me of. That guy that's just, he is convinced he is the funniest, most smart, amazing person on planet Earth, and if you don't find him entertaining, you're just wrong. So, I know the book's going to sell because controversy sells, but in terms of hockey related books, I would put his at the bottom of the list in terms of ones I'm going to buy, because I don't think there's going to be any insight in terms of NHL. You guys can let me know what you think in the comment section below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through, and thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.